Hello, everyone. The title of this presentation is Truth is Beyond All Teachings. And what we are going to explore is the pursuit of truth in the context of the Theosophical movement. The pursuit of truth is an essential aspect of the Theosophical tradition. Probably everyone agrees with the words that Jesus pronounced, in which he said, "Truth will set you free." However, this is not as simple and direct as it may seem. The pursuit of truth, especially of spiritual truth, has actually been quite challenging for humanity. It has divided people. It has led people to fight with each other. In the name of truth, infidels have been tortured and killed. Those who dared to speak inconvenient truths have also been put to death or attacked in their reputation and influence. So truth is a dangerous pursuit. And for truth to set us free, we must be extraordinarily wise and humble. Now, the pursuit of truth has also hurt the Theosophical movement. As we are all aware, within our movement there are divisions, and there is even ill will between different groups. In fact, this conference was created to try to heal some of these wounds in which the Theosophical movement has incurred in the pursuit of truth. With all the good that our movement has done in many fields, I think unfortunately in this particular area, we have failed to be different from other religious and spiritual organizations. Obviously, I'm talking about the Theosophical movement as a whole. Many individuals and even groups have not engaged in this kind of division. But as I was mentioning, this conference is an attempt at trying to gather all the people who feel in this way, who feel that there should be no divisions within the Theosophical movement, and see if we can find ways to bridge this gap. Unfortunately, even today we can hear or read on the internet or in books that are published by theosophical publishing companies declarations of truth about different theosophical authors and organizations. Phrases such as "this is Theosophy," "these are the authentic teachings," and "that is pseudo-theosophy" can be found in publications. And this attitude, of course, makes it very difficult for theosophists of the different traditions to cooperate, to feel love and goodwill with each other. If we think deeply and look carefully at this point, I think we will realize that deep cooperation is not really possible if we are coming from an attitude of we have the true doctrine and not the other groups. There will be, if we come from that spirit, there will be an attitude of, in some or another way, of dominance. And also those other groups who are being said that they don't hold the true doctrine, how can they have goodwill, with those who are saying this? Now, of course, the fact that we are attending this conference means that we agree that this is not something that should happen. And especially since our movement It's a movement that has been founded to promote brotherhood, freedom of thought, to fight against dogmatism and intolerance. We could, of course, produce endless quotes from HPB, the Masters, and many other theosophists in all the organizations about how central these goals are to the theosophical movement. For example, I give you just one quote that is connected to the aspect of wisdom that is part of the subject in this conference. Blavatsky said, valuing freedom of thought above all things as the only way of reaching at some future time that wisdom of which every theosophist ought to be enamored, we recognize the right to the same freedom in our foes as in our friends. So pay attention to these phrases that are quite radical in a sense. Above all things, the only way, every theosophist. The idea of freedom of thought is essential in the theosophical movement. And again, although there are many groups and individuals who stand by this, I'm not sure that we could say that this is a feature of the theosophical movement as a whole. But of course, there is always time to redress the wrongs and to come closer to the idea. And I think this is part of what we are trying to do here. Now, besides the fact that the attitude of trying to declare what is true theosophy as opposed to what is not really helpful for the purposes of bringing unity, I would say that it is based on a lack of understanding of what truth is, especially when we are referring to esoteric truths. As the motto of the Theosophical Society that Blavatsky chose says, truth is beyond all teachings. This, of course, is not the translation that has been officially adopted by the different theosophical groups. The traditional translation is, there is no religion higher than truth. But if you look at the Sanskrit words, this is a good translation. Satya means truth. Nasti paro means higher than or beyond all other. Dharma means religion, spiritual teaching, doctrine, and many other things. But Blavatsky chose to translate this word dharma in the context of teachings. So we could translate or paraphrase somewhat this motto in different ways, and they can give us a sense of what this means. For example, no teaching can contain the truth. Think of that. No teaching can contain the truth. That's what we are saying, right? There is no teaching, no religious teaching, no spiritual teaching higher than truth. All teachings are lower than truth. No words can correctly express truth. Or we could say the truth is not what can be written or spoken. Perhaps this may remind you of the Tao Te Ching that says the Tao, let's say the truth that can be spoken of is not the truth, it's not the real truth. Another paraphrase of this is all descriptions of truth are partial and relatively wrong, right? If truth is beyond all words, that means that all words, all descriptions, all books are not quite true, are at least partially or relatively wrong. So this is very important to keep in mind. And I don't know that we think about this enough, because this is the case of all esoteric truths. esoteric truths belong to a plane that is beyond the domain of space as we know it, of time as we know it, of matter, of law as we know it. Truth belongs to a different plane, and all words that we use, all images, all concepts that we may use are created to describe the physical plane. Perhaps for this reason, one of the masters, Master KH, said, "The occult science is not one in which secrets can be communicated of a sudden by a written or even verbal communication." So the occult science cannot be communicated by writings or even verbally. If so, he says, all the brothers, all that the masters would have to do would be to publish a handbook of the art, which might be taught in schools as grammar is. The truth, however, is that till the neophyte attains to the condition necessary for that degree of illumination, to which and for which he is entitled and fitted, until that time, most, if not all, the secrets are incommunicable. Most, if not all, the secrets are incommunicable. So what does this mean for all theosophical books that have been written and published? We normally read and study the books thinking that they are a faithful expression of esoteric truths. But if we really look into this, we will find many quotes from Blavatsky and the Masters and others, where they say basically that the teachings that we see in a book can never be the esoteric truths. There are many reasons for this. First, that no description is the same as a direct perception. We can have a description of an unknown country, and of course it's not the same as being in that country. But this example is not even close to the problem here, because, well, we know other countries which have similar objects. So a description may give us a fairly good idea, although not the same as experience in the country. But when we come to esoteric truths, as we said, we are talking about a different realm, a different dimension. What we are trying to do is like trying to describe what a color is by means of smells. See, we are trying to describe what spiritual esoteric dimensions are by means of the physical dimension. And this is why Blavatsky, her masters, and many others say this really cannot be done. Books are published because, well, something has to be done on the physical plane to turn the mind of people toward the spiritual realms. But the idea of books, as Blavatsky explains many times, is that they lead us into a meditation, into an inner journey, so that eventually we can raise our consciousness to those spiritual realms and then have a direct experience of them. Of course, there are some other teachings that are about daily life, how to practice, how to prepare ourselves to do this. Those would not be esoteric teachings, let's say, although are teachings about the esoteric path or the esoteric life. But I'm talking about the esoteric teachings, because many of the divisions within the Theosophical movement have to do with things that are really not that relevant. We don't discuss much about what kind of theosophical life should be led. As we are going to see, the discussions are about esoteric truths. But then they are not really about esoteric truths, because few people at this point in evolution have access to direct perception of these esoteric truths. The discussions are about the words that different authors have chosen to try to depict these esoteric truths. And as we have seen, the words are not the truth. So declaring that any one particular expression of esoteric teachings is correct and the other is not is fraught with dangers. This doesn't mean that there are no incorrect statements, that everything is correct. Obviously, there are some statements that may have nothing to do with truth. But the problem is that determining which statements are correct and which are not, when we are talking about esoteric truths, is not easy at all. It's not something that we can do just from reading the information on a book. So we need to examine this. How do we deal with esoteric information? Let me give an example so that this is not so abstract. We encounter a large amount of esoteric information in theosophical literature. For example, the idea of the planetary chains, that the Earth is part of a chain of globes through which evolution happens. And some authors say there are 7 globes in the planetary chain. Other authors say there are 12. Some authors say that Mars and Mercury are part of the Earth planetary chain, and some authors say that they are not. So how do we decide? How do we determine which is truth? There is no way that any of us individually can verify these claims until we have actually gone through a few occult initiations. There is a quote in the Mahatma letters where the master says that they realize that people cannot research into this and write, in an intelligible way about all these things until after the 3rd initiation. This was in the context of Mohini Chatterjee and Laura Holloway trying to write this book on anthropogenesis, man fragments of forgotten history. So we are in this position. We have these different theories about the globes and the chains, etc. And how do we determine which one we adhere to? If we are going to be honest, we just rely on authority, on belief, right? Sure, it may be a belief that makes rational sense to you, but that is not much. It's not saying much in the context of the theosophical authors. All theosophical teachings are quite rational and internally consistent, and all authors that propose a model, they have, they are logical and rational justifications. Well, one may say, what about intuition? My intuition tells me that this is the truth. Sure, but unless we are very arrogant, we have to recognize that there are very intelligent, earnest, intuitive people supporting all the different theories in the theosophical movement. As we know, at this point in evolution, we are in the process of awakening the intuition. And even though each individual is right for each individual to follow and to stimulate and follow our intuitions, we can't claim that our intuitions are infallible. So in practice, ultimately speaking, we simply rely on authority. How many times have you been in a situation where somebody brings up a quote of a teaching that is not known by people there, and people will ask, well, who said that, in order to decide whether to believe or not in what that information is saying, that quote is saying. Or how many times you can produce a quote without giving the author that wrote that quote, and ask people, do you believe or not in this quote? And people may change whether they believe in that or not, depending on the signature, the person that said that. So this is common, and there is nothing wrong with it per se. There is no other way out at this point, since we cannot perceive esoteric realities directly. So I'm not really saying that things should not be this way. What I'm saying is that we should be aware and honest and humble and recognize that this is the way, that this is what happens, because that can lead us into a far healthier relationship with the teachings and with others. So since we rely on authority, let us look into this a little deeper. Who is the authority? Who is the person that we say we trust? We can say, well, we trust Blavatsky. There are some people that say Theosophy is just what Blavatsky and the master said. That's fine. We can have any particular approach, although it is quite an untenable position if you are going to use Blavatsky's own words. I showed in an article that I published in the Theosophist called What is Theosophy, with all quotes from HPV, that it's not really possible to say that what HPV wrote is true Theosophy. She didn't agree with that, and that only that is Theosophy. But most Theosophists don't stop with HPV. They also rely on later teachers that belong to their tradition. So here things get more complicated. Coming back to the previous example, one could say, well, Blavatsky didn't talk about 12 globes. She talked about 7. So that is a theosophical teaching, and the theosophical teaching about the 12 globes is pseudo-theosophy. Or another person could say, well, HPV said that Mars and Mercury are not part of the Earth chain. So that is Theosophy. And those who say that they do belong is pseudo-Theosophy. But then when we are part of a tradition that says something that is different from Theosophy, from what Blavatsky said, we don't say that that is pseudo-Theosophy. Then in this case, it is not pseudo-Theosophy, it's just that our favorite author is expanding on the teachings and talking about esoteric teachings that HPV could not talk at the time. But when other authors belonging to other traditions do that, then in that case, yes, it is pseudo-Theosophy. So you see, this is a double standard that is not based on anything but our trust in authority. So I think it's very important to keep this in mind, especially when we are coming to details of the esoteric philosophy, because we have to keep in mind that most theosophical authors agree in all the basic theosophical subjects of unity, karma, evolution, reincarnation, service, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying that this means that we should study all authors, like all authors, etc. I think there is a place for preferences. Some of us may be attracted to certain subjects, to certain approaches. Some people love Blavatsky's very abstract and complex way of presenting metaphysics. Other people are not so inclined to that. They may not like metaphysics so much. They may like more the application of the teachings, or they may like a presentation that is more intellectually consistent, or we are all different. Some people may like certain style of writing. Some other people may not like that style. For some people, a certain style may feel arrogant or condescending. For other people, it may feel in a different way. So personal preferences are perfectly fine. We, as personalities, are limited, and therefore we are going to resonate more with some aspects of the teachings or authors than with others. And that is fine. There is diversity, is not unity, is not, as we all know, the erasing of diversity. Diversity enriches the unity, because through the different presentations we can find the one that is more useful to our particular personality. Now, what we have to be careful is to say that those things which ring true to us, those approaches that are more useful to us, are therefore absolute truths, approaches that are absolutely right, and that everybody else should follow those. And whoever is not following those, then they are following a wrong path. See, this seems quite rational, doesn't it? But then we many times fall into these kind of attitudes. And the same with the different organizations. It's not that we should merge all theosophical organizations into one. That is not really necessary, because again, diversity is good. There are some organizations that are more focused on, a particular set of subjects or a particular set of authors. And there are some people who feel much, helped by that approach, where there is a certain structure, there is a certain direction, there is a certain focus. But then there are some other people who would feel constrained in that situation. There are some people who need to have the freedom to explore in a wider way, to have certain hints as to what subjects, what authors to study, etc. So all our organizations have developed with their own personality, their own particular flavor and approach. And it's great that they are there, so that all humanity can be helped, and not just those who think and feel just like us. Because my organization may be perfect for me, and that organization may be very good for people who are similar to me, but what about all those who are not? Again, there is no one absolute path, as we know. So it is fine for different organizations to be there. And if we belong to one organization, it is our duty to help that organization, because this is the organization that has helped me in my life and has helped me live in a better way and understand the world better, etc. So it's natural that part of my theosophical duty is to help this organization to stay alive, active, to help improve this organization, so that others who, like me, can be helped by this approach can come into this organization. So it's perfectly fine. And of course, if we are so inclined, we can help more globally. But I think, and this is the last point, I think this is what is really important for us to keep in mind, to try to generate the sense that we are working for Theosophy globally. What we want is people in humanity to be helped by Theosophy. And all theosophical traditions support the same basic truths: the idea of unity, celestial beings, evolution, karma, reincarnation, the spiritual and personal natures, life after death, the path, compassion and service for humanity. There is no conflict in that. The differences are always in details. But humanity needs Theosophy. It doesn't matter in what flavor, in what dressing we are presenting the Theosophical teachings. When a person comes to Theosophy through whichever organization, that is all of our success. It's a success of all of us. It doesn't matter through which organization, because there is one more person that is being helped by Theosophy. And we have to trust that there is enough diversity in the world for all our organizations to have something to offer and to be successful in the particular approach that the organizations have chosen. What is important, I feel, is to start thinking globally. We are all the same. It doesn't matter that these are different organizations. We are all the same, trying to do the same thing, that is bringing Theosophy to a world that sorely needs it. And I think that the ITC can be a great tool in bringing this sense of unity and this sense of cooperation. And there is a lot that can be done on this direction. For those who may be interested, I wrote a little article in Theosophy Forward with some ideas for consideration, unity and diversity in the Theosophical movement. Just, as I said, just some ideas to consider in this very important work of trying to bring a global cooperation in the promotion of Theosophy. Thank you.